e-learning nerds, welcome to eLang Explained. This video is a part of our core curriculum series where we break down some of the key concepts and pieces of meta-language from Units 1 to 4 English Language. So get excited for today's episode where we're going to be learning about the Spoken Discourse Strategies. So, what are Spoken Discourse Strategies? Well, Spoken Discourse Strategies are the elements of language that are used to manage texts within the spoken mode. They're different from spoken discourse features, which are those language features that most commonly appear in a spoken mode. Because spoken discourse strategies are all about the ways that language is used to control the flow and sequence of a text. But just like spoken discourse features, spoken discourse strategies can also be mimicked by written discourse features. Now, there are 4 spoken discourse strategies, and we remember these using the mnemonic CTMT. And that, of course, includes code switching, topic management, management of repair sequences, and turn taking. So let's jump into these and explain in a little bit more depth what each of the spoken discourse strategies involves. We'll start off with code switching. Now, code switching involves moving from one dialect into another within a discourse, and it's often used to signal belonging and in-group membership. So we've got an example sentence here where S starts off by saying, "Hey, it's so good to see you" in English, and then they code switch into French with "ça va." Here, we can infer that S is speaking to someone as part of this discourse who understands French, that they're able to infer the meaning of this code switching. And because S is able to move from English, but specifically Standard Australian English, into French, when they're having this conversation, they're able to signal often a closer social distance with the people that they're speaking to, who have that shared understanding of the French language. But code switching itself isn't limited to moving from one language to another. We can also code switch when we move from Standard Australian English into a sociolect, or when we move from Standard Australian English into a migrant ethnolect. So it's really important when we're thinking about code switching to make sure we're thinking about how an individual is moving between these dialects to showcase their belonging. And young people use code switching all of the time. Think about the ways that you might code switch within one English language lesson. You might start off by speaking Standard Australian English with your teacher, and then you might move into a more formal register of Australian English that uses jargon, perhaps even a little bit of bureaucraties when you're doing your written analysis. And we know that young people are great at code switching because you do it all the time. Think about all of the code switching that might happen within one English language lesson. You walk in with your friends and you're speaking very much maybe an internet-based sociolect. Then you start talking to your teacher and you move into an English language-based dialect with lots of jargon and very specific targeted language. But then you move into a written analysis task on spoken discourse strategies, and suddenly you're code switching into Standard Australian English. Now, code switching here is happening at lots of points within this one lesson because you as the individual student are being required to move from different dialects to signal your belonging to the in-group of teenagers, the in-group of English language students, but also to signal your education and knowledge in that field of English language. Next up, we have topic management. Now, topic management is an umbrella term for the 4 strategies that allow a speaker to control the key ideas and topics within a discourse. It's really important to remember that if you see topic management in a short answer question, it's actually asking you about the ways that the topic is initiated, maintained, digressed from, or is manipulated to form a topic loop. Now, don't overthink these subheadings. So topic initiation involves introducing a new topic that makes logical sense within the flow of the discourse. And you've just heard me demonstrate topic initiation because after initiating that topic of topic management, it follows logically that will then initiate a topic of this specific elements of topic management. This is different from topic maintenance, where we're using language to continue discussing a topic that has already been initiated within the discourse. The odd one out, though, are digressions from the topic. Because when we digress from the topic, we're introducing and initiating a new topic that does not logically flow within the discourse. So up until this point in the video, we've been very focused on the spoken discourse strategies. But if I was going to digress from this topic, I might say something like, have you seen the newest Jetstar Australia social media post where Jetstar used lots of slang from an online sociolect to appeal to an audience of younger people? Now, this topic is kind of related to English language, maybe, but it doesn't follow logically in our discourse about topic management to start talking about social media posts. But if we can somehow get this discourse back to a logically following topic, then we form a topic loop. And in fact, if we move from talking about that Jetstar social media post to returning back to our discussion of the elements of topic management, then we're forming a topic loop. We're returning the focus of the discourse back from the digression to a topic that had been previously initiated and is a topic that follows logically within a discourse on a specific field. Next up, we have management of repair sequences. Now, this refers to the utterances that are used by speakers to control the different ways that they'll use repairs, false starts, or other non-fluency features to adjust their language within a discourse. So, if you've watched our video on spoken discourse features, you'll know all about these non-fluency features. And it's really important to remember that the difference between non-fluency features as a spoken discourse feature and management of repair sequences as a spoken discourse strategy is that the spoken discourse feature is referring to the use of the specific language feature. So that's being able to identify a repair, a false start, or another non-fluency feature. However, when we're looking at these features through the lens of that spoken discourse strategy management of repair sequences, we're thinking really deliberately about how the use of these non-fluency features is allowing a speaker to control their language, and the ways that this is being used really strategically to allow speakers to alter, change, improve, or embellish the ideas that they are presenting. So we've got an example discourse here between S and E. S starts off by saying, that movie was so, super good. E says, oh, did you really think so? And here, S is going to use some of those non-fluency features to say, I mean, no, I think it was really good. So we've got a bit of a false start here, with I mean being replaced by no, I think it was really good. And the reason why S has used this non-fluency feature of a false start here is to really emphasize that opinion, that S did really think that movie was good. Then, finally, our last spoken discourse strategy is turn-taking. Now, turn-taking, just like topic management, is an umbrella term that refers to the three main strategies that allow a speaker to control who is speaking within a discourse, who is using that language to communicate. And when we're thinking about turn-taking, we're actually thinking about this concept of the floor. And the floor in linguistics refers to the spotlight. It refers to the person who has the attention. So there are three things that we can do with the floor. We can take the floor and use language to begin speaking. We can pass the floor. This is where we stop speaking and we use our language to signal to another participant in the discourse that they are able to begin speaking. Or we can use language to continue speaking within a discourse, and this is called holding the floor. So we're going to have a look at a text that you probably haven't seen before, unless of course you've already watched our video on spoken discourse features. Now, this text is an interview from the Australian news program The Project, and in this interview, the hosts of the project, Walida Lee and Steve Price, are going to interview comedian Sammy J about his strategies for faking his knowledge of sports during radio interviews. Your challenge is to have a read of this text and see if you can identify an example of each of the spoken discourse strategies that we've been talking about. Did you go? Now, you'll be able to see here that I've color-coded each of our 4 spoken discourse strategies. But I haven't identified every example of these strategies. So if you've got other examples of things that you think reflect code switching, topic management, management of repair sequences, or turn taking in the text, make sure you add it in the comments below. We're going to start with code switching because that's probably the most difficult spoken discourse strategy to find in this text. And let's be honest, it's a little bit sketchy. Because if we were going to talk about code switching for this text, we would be talking about how Sammy J moves between standard Australian English, but specifically that dialect of language where he is the guest being interviewed, to things like the language use on line 13 and 17 that's highlighted in the purple, where Sammy J code switches into that dialect of interviewers, but specifically interviewers interviewing athletes. When he says things like, big game out there, and then uses the interrogative, how did it feel? We've also got the interrogative, nice lane out there. And that last interrogative on line 7, you must have felt the pressure. Now, this is a sketchy example because if we're arguing this as code switching, we have to be able to make a case that when journalists are interviewing athletes, they use different language, they use a different dialect of language than when they themselves are being interviewed or when they're interviewing people who have different occupational identities. In green, we've got our examples of topic management. So on line 1, we can see Waleed Ali really clearly initiate the topic of Sammy J. With that imperative, would you please welcome the very unsporty Sammy J? Here, using the imperative to signal to the audience that they need to welcome Sammy J, the audience then infer that they need to start clapping, but also using this imperative to signal to the audience who is going to be on this episode of the project. Then, on lines 6 and 8, we can see Waleed Ali use these declarative sentences to start initiating a new topic within the text, the topic of Sammy J as an unsporty person being able to interview different athletes. And then on line 11, with no you don't Waleed, that's the trick, we see 2 simple sentences that allow Sammy J to maintain this topic of interviewing athletes as an unsporty person. In red, we have our management of repair sequences. We could talk about that false start in line 6 with wait. We could also talk about on line 13, the use of pausing and that voiced hesitation as repair sequences that allow Sammy J to build time for him to figure out exactly what language he's looking to use to make this point really clearly. Lastly though, in blue, we have our turn taking. So we can see on line 3, Sammy J uses the interrogative, how you going, to pass the floor to Waleed Ali, who uses the declarative, it's great to have you here, to take the floor. Now, interrogatives are often a language feature that is used to pass the floor to another speaker, but we could also talk about the use of pausing on line 17 at the end of that phrase, like imagine you're a footballer, to signal to Waleed Ali that Sammy J is passing the floor and it's time for Waleed Ali to take the floor on line 18. Now, spoken discourse features and strategies often go hand in hand in analysis. And in fact, we've seen lots of VCAR short answer questions where students are asked to analyse or comment on the use of spoken discourse features and strategies. But it's really important to carefully read each short answer question, because if you get a question about spoken discourse strategies, it's really important you're analysing CTMT, not COUP DAM. It's equally important that if you ever see a short answer question that asks you about spoken discourse features, you focus your analysis on the features of COUP DAM as opposed to the spoken discourse strategies, CTMT. But that's all we have time for today. Remember to be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time for more Elang Explained.
Thanks for watching Elang Explained. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. For more free resources, head to elangexplained.com.au.